Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. So picture this. Me, fresh out of a terrible breakup, convinced I needed to reinvent myself. Part of that reinvention involved diving headfirst into the online dating scene. I created a profile on Meetup, a dating app that promised genuine connections and meaningful relationships. Red flag number one, the sheer amount of glittery, over-the-top marketing. But hey, I was optimistic. I matched with this guy named Ethan. He was photogenic, model-esque even. His profile was filled with pictures of him hiking scenic trails, volunteering at animal shelters, and attending fancy art galleries. His bio was a carefully crafted mix of intellect and humor, mentioning his love for classic literature and his crippling addiction to cheesy rom-coms. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But my recently heartbroken brain was too eager to believe in fairy tales to notice the warning signs. We started messaging each other, and the conversations were electric. He was witty, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked all the right questions about my hopes, my dreams, my favorite flavor of ice cream. He even remembered the small details I mentioned in passing, like my obsession with obscure indie bands and my lifelong quest to perfect my grandmother's pasta sauce recipe. I was hooked. After a week of intense messaging, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a romantic picnic in a secluded park overlooking the city. It sounded idyllic, straight out of a movie. I was hesitant. I'd never met someone from a dating app so quickly. But he was so persuasive, so insistent that we had to meet in person to truly connect. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The day of the picnic arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, what to say, how to act. I wanted to make a good impression, to prove to myself that I was capable of attracting someone amazing. I finally settled on a cute sundress and a healthy dose of self-deprecating humor. I arrived at the park a few minutes early, my heart pounding in my chest. I found the spot he had described, a grassy knoll overlooking the city skyline. And there he was, Ethan, looking even more handsome in person than in his pictures. He was laying out a checkered blanket, surrounded by wicker baskets and bottles of wine. The first hour was magical. We laughed, we talked, we shared stories. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we had known each other for years. He complimented my dress, my smile, my intelligence. He listened intently as I rambled on about my passions and anxieties. He seemed genuinely captivated by everything I had to say. But then, things started to get weird. He began asking increasingly personal questions about my past relationships, pressing me for details about my ex-boyfriend, the reasons for our breakup, the emotional scars I still carried. I tried to deflect, to change the subject, but he was relentless. He wanted to know everything, to dissect every aspect of my romantic history. His gaze intensified. His smile became strained. He started touching me more frequently, his hand lingering on my arm, his knee brushing against mine. It wasn't overtly aggressive, but it was insistent. I felt a growing sense of unease, a creeping feeling that I was losing control of the situation. Then, he started talking about control. He said that relationships were about power dynamics, about one person leading and the other following. He said that he was a natural leader, that he knew what was best for me, that he could help me overcome my insecurities and become the best version of myself. His words were smooth and seductive, but there was a dark undercurrent to them, a subtle hint of manipulation. I realized that he wasn't interested in a genuine connection. He was interested in domination. He wanted to mold me into his ideal partner, to control my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. I tried to stand up, to create some distance between us, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He pulled me back down onto the blanket, his eyes burning into mine. He said that I was being silly, that I was overreacting, that I needed to trust him. I knew then that I had made a mistake, a huge, potentially dangerous mistake. I had allowed myself to be lured in by his charm, his good looks, his carefully constructed persona. I had ignored the warning signs, the red flags that were waving frantically in my face. I had to get out of there. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain calm. I told him that I needed to use the restroom, that I would be right back. He reluctantly released my arm, his eyes still fixed on me. I stood up and walked away as quickly as I could without appearing panicked. I didn't go to the restroom. I ran. I ran out of the park, onto the street, flagging down a taxi. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my apartment. The doors locked, the curtains drawn. I spent the next few days in a state of near paralysis, replaying the events of that picnic over and over in my mind. I couldn't believe how easily I had been manipulated, how close I had come to putting myself in serious danger. I blocked Ethan's number, deleted my dating app profile, and swore off online dating forever. I needed time to heal, to rebuild my self-esteem, to learn to trust my instincts again. That experience taught me to always be aware of the subtle signs of manipulation and control. It taught me to trust my gut, even when my head is telling me otherwise. It taught me that charm and charisma can be deceiving, that not everyone who seems perfect is actually genuine. It taught me that it's okay to be assertive, to set boundaries, to say no, even if it means disappointing someone. But most importantly, that experience taught me the importance of self-love and self-respect. It taught me that I am worthy of genuine love and connection, that I don't need to change myself to please someone else, and that I should never compromise my values or my safety for the sake of a relationship. I am now cautious about online dating. I don't know if I will ever date anyone online again, but I will never forget about that incident. I use that incident to make sure that I'm aware of who I'm dating and what I am doing. I am more assertive about saying no and setting boundaries. I met Liam online, on one of those dating sites that promises to match you with your soulmate based on a complex algorithm. He was a graphic designer, loved hiking, and had a rescue dog named Gus. His profile was full of quirky humor and photos of him smiling in various national parks. I was cautiously optimistic. After a string of dating app disasters, the guy who spent the entire date talking about his crypto investments, the one who brought his mother along without mentioning it beforehand, Liam seemed normal, refreshingly so. We chatted online for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet in person. The conversation flowed easily, and we seemed to have a lot in common. He suggested a local coffee shop, a place I knew well and felt comfortable in. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table by the window, Gus curled up at his feet. He looked even better in person. His smile was genuine, and his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. The date went perfectly. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. We discussed our favorite books, our travel dreams, and our families. Liam was attentive, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Gus, the dog, was a bonus. He was well-behaved and adorable, and I found myself sneaking him pets under the table. We ended the date with a walk in the park, Gus happily trotting alongside us. Liam walked me back to my car and, after a hesitant pause, asked if he could see me again. I said yes without hesitation. I was genuinely excited about him. He felt like a breath of fresh air, a welcome change from the usual dating scene. The next few weeks were a blur of dates. We went to movies, tried new restaurants, and even went on a hike with Gus. Liam was always a gentleman, opening doors, pulling out chairs, and making sure I felt comfortable and safe. He was respectful of my boundaries and never pressured me for anything. It was exactly what I thought I wanted. Then, about a month in, things started to shift, subtly at first. He started calling me more often, sometimes multiple times a day. He'd text me constantly, asking what I was doing, who I was with. I chalked it up to him being really into me, which, admittedly, was flattering, but it started to feel a little intense. He also started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. Once, I was having lunch with a friend at a cafe across town, and he just appeared, saying he was in the neighborhood and thought he'd surprise me. Another time, I was at a yoga class, and he was waiting outside when I came out, saying he'd looked up the schedule online because he wanted to make sure I got home safe. Again, I tried to brush it off as him being caring, but a small seed of unease had been planted. The turning point came one Saturday night. We had made plans to go to a concert, but I got a last-minute call from work. I had to cover a shift, which meant canceling our date. I felt terrible, but Liam seemed understanding. He said he was disappointed, but that work came first. He told me to have a good shift and promised we'd reschedule soon. I worked a long, stressful shift, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was shower and go to bed. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked down the street that looked familiar. It took me a moment to realize it was Liam's. My heart sank. I parked my car and walked towards my apartment building, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. As I reached the entrance, Liam stepped out from behind a bush. He was smiling, but his eyes looked different, darker somehow. "Hey," he said, his voice a little too casual. "I was just in the neighborhood." "Liam, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to see you," he said, taking a step closer. "I missed you." "I told you I had to work," I said, taking a step back. "I'm exhausted. I just want to go inside." He didn't move. He just stood there, blocking my path, his smile still plastered on his face. "I thought maybe we could still hang out for a little while," he said. "I brought Gus." I looked past him and saw Gus sitting patiently in the passenger seat of his car, looking confused. I loved Gus, but in that moment, even the sight of the dog couldn't ease the rising panic I felt. "Liam, I really can't," I said, my voice trembling now. "I'm too tired. Maybe another time." He reached out and touched my arm, his grip surprisingly tight. "Just for a few minutes," he said, his voice low and insistent. "Please." I tried to pull away, but he held on tighter. "Liam, let go of me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile finally faded, and his expression hardened. "Why are you being like this?" he asked, his voice laced with anger. "I just want to spend some time with you. Is that so wrong?" I never felt unsafe until that moment, when I realized the smile was gone. It was like a switch had flipped, and the charming, easygoing Liam I thought I knew had vanished, replaced by someone cold and possessive. I was alone, late at night, with a man who was refusing to respect my boundaries. "Yes, it is wrong," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "I told you I was tired. I told you I wanted to go inside. You're not respecting my wishes." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. Then, slowly, he released my arm. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Go inside. See if I care." He turned and walked back to his car, slamming the door behind him. He peeled out of the parking space and sped off down the street. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, trying to process what had just happened. I ran inside my apartment and locked the door behind me. I called my best friend, Sarah, and told her everything. She was furious and told me to call the police. I hesitated. He hadn't physically hurt me, and I wasn't sure if what he'd done was enough to warrant police involvement. Sarah convinced me to at least file a report, just in case. I spent the next few hours talking to the police, recounting the events of the evening and the unsettling behavior that had led up to it. They took my statement and said they would look into it. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every passing car, sent shivers down my spine. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to figure out what I had missed, what had led to this. The next morning, I woke up exhausted and terrified. I checked my phone and saw several missed calls and text messages from Liam. I deleted them without reading them. I blocked his number and his social media accounts. I changed my locks and installed a security system. The police contacted Liam and warned him to stay away from me. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he just really liked me and wanted to make sure I was okay. They told him that any further contact would result in arrest. I never heard from Liam again, but the experience left me shaken and distrustful. It took me a long time to feel safe again. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, always looking over my shoulder, always on guard. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I take things slowly, pay attention to red flags, and trust my instincts. I learned a valuable lesson that night, that charm can be deceptive, that even the most seemingly normal person can have a dark side, and that it's always better to be safe than sorry, and that even a simple smile can be a mask. Okay, so this whole thing happened last summer, and honestly, I'm still trying to unpack it. I need to get this off my chest. I was fresh off a pretty brutal breakup, feeling like I needed to prove I was still, dateable. My friends convinced me to try online dating, specifically this app called Connect, which was supposed to be all about meaningful connections and long-term relationships. I know, but I was vulnerable and wanting to believe in the fairy tale. So I made a profile, put up some flattering-ish pictures, and started swiping. I matched with this guy, Liam, pretty quickly. He seemed different. He wasn't the typical, hey beautiful kind of guy. His opening message was actually about a book I'd mentioned in my bio, which I thought was a nice touch. We started chatting, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He was smart, funny, and we had a lot of common interests: art, indie music, hiking. He worked as a software developer, which seemed stable and normal. I was cautiously optimistic. After a week or so of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested this little independent cafe downtown, which I thought was a good sign, not trying to pressure me with dinner or drinks right away. When I saw him waiting outside, I was immediately relieved. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a little better in person. He had this kind smile and these bright blue eyes that just seemed sincere. The coffee date went really well. We talked for hours, bouncing from topic to topic, laughing easily. There weren't any awkward silences, no forced conversation. It felt natural, easy. I was starting to think maybe this online dating thing wasn't so bad after all. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. I could feel myself blushing. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I said yes without hesitation. The next few weeks were like something out of a rom-com. We went on dates to museums, concerts, picnics in the park. He was always a perfect gentleman, opening doors, pulling out chairs, paying the bill. He listened intently when I talked, remembered details about my life, and made me feel genuinely valued. He even surprised me with flowers one day, just because. I was falling hard, and I knew it. He started talking about the future, about traveling together, meeting his family, maybe even moving in together eventually. It felt fast, but I was so caught up in the whirlwind of it all that I didn't really question it. I wanted to believe it was real. He told me about his past, how he'd been hurt in previous relationships, and how he was finally ready to find someone to settle down with. He said he saw something special in me, something he'd been searching for his whole life. It was all so intoxicating. Then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began wanting to know where I was at all times, who I was with, what I was doing. At first, I brushed it off as him just being attentive, caring. But it gradually escalated. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, and if I didn't respond right away, he'd get anxious and call me repeatedly. He started showing up unannounced at my work, just to say hi. It was flattering at first, but then it became suffocating. He also started getting jealous, even when there was nothing to be jealous about. If I mentioned a male co-worker, he'd grill me about our relationship, accusing me of flirting or having feelings for him. He'd scroll through my social media, obsessively analyzing every like, every comment, every follow. He even created a fake profile to test me, trying to message me to see if I'd respond. I found out about it when he accidentally sent me a message from the fake account, calling me by my name. I was furious. I confronted him about his behavior, telling him that it was making me uncomfortable and that I needed some space. He apologized profusely, saying he was just afraid of losing me, that he loved me so much he couldn't bear the thought of me being with someone else. He promised to change, to trust me more. I wanted to believe him, so I gave him another chance. But things didn't get better. They got worse. He started isolating me from my friends and family. He'd make excuses for why I couldn't see them, saying they were bad influences or that they didn't understand our relationship. He'd manipulate me into spending all my time with him, guilting me if I wanted to do anything else. He even started controlling my finances, telling me I was spending too much money and that he'd take care of everything for me. I was so emotionally drained and confused that I let him. I was losing myself. One night, I was at his apartment and we got into a fight. It started over something small, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown screaming match. He accused me of cheating on him, of lying to him, of not loving him enough. I tried to defend myself, but he wouldn't listen. He was completely irrational, his eyes filled with rage. Then he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to make me flinch. He'd never touched me like that before. I told him to let go, but he wouldn't. He started yelling in my face, telling me I was his, that I belonged to him. I was terrified. I managed to pull away and ran out of his apartment, not stopping until I got to my car. I drove home in a daze, my body shaking, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I realized that I was in a dangerous situation, that Liam wasn't the man I thought he was. He was manipulative, controlling, and potentially violent. I knew I had to get out. The next day, I broke up with him over text. I didn't want to see him in person, didn't want to risk another confrontation. He responded with a barrage of angry messages, accusing me of being heartless and cruel. He threatened to ruin my life, to tell everyone I knew what a terrible person I was. I blocked his number and his social media accounts. But it wasn't over. He started stalking me. He'd show up at my work, at my gym, at my favorite coffee shop. He'd follow me home, park outside my apartment, leave me voicemails. I changed my locks, got a security system, and filed a police report. But it didn't stop him. One night, I came home and found my apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but everything was rearranged. My clothes were scattered on the floor, my furniture was overturned, and my pictures were defaced. On my bedroom mirror, scrawled in lipstick, were the words, "If I can't have you, no one can." I was terrified. I knew it was him. I moved out of my apartment that night and went to stay with my parents. I didn't feel safe anywhere. The police eventually caught him, and he was charged with stalking and harassment. He's currently awaiting trial. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of it all. I'm in therapy, trying to process the trauma and rebuild my self-esteem. I'm afraid to trust anyone, afraid to put myself out there again. I keep replaying the whole thing in my head, wondering if I could have seen the red flags earlier, if I could have prevented it all from happening. It's been a long and painful process, but I'm slowly starting to heal. I'm learning to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own safety and well-being. I know that not all men are like Liam, but I'm definitely more cautious now. I'm taking a break from dating, focusing on myself and my own happiness. I don't know when I'll be ready to try again, but I know that when I do, I'll be a lot wiser and a lot stronger. The whole experience has left me shaken, yes, but also more aware. It's a harsh lesson learned, but one I hope will protect me, and maybe others, in the future. There's a dark side to the search for connection, and sometimes, the most meaningful connection you can make is with yourself. So I never thought I'd be the person with a dating app horror story. I always considered myself pretty level-headed, not easily fooled, but I guess everyone has a blind spot, and mine. Apparently, it was a guy named Liam. It all started innocently enough. I was a few months out of a pretty serious relationship, and feeling that itch to put myself back out there. Bumble seemed like a good place to start. Less pressure than some other apps, and I liked the idea of women making the first move. I matched with Liam pretty quickly. His profile was intriguing. He had this whole brooding artist thing going on. Lots of pictures of him looking pensive in front of canvases covered in abstract art, or holding a guitar in a dimly lit room. His bio was short and cryptic, seeking inspiration. Let's create something. It was cheesy, I know, but something about it appealed to my slightly too romantic side. Our first few chats were actually really good. He wasn't pushy or overly sexual, like so many guys on those apps. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my job, my hobbies, my family. We talked about art, music, books. We actually had a lot in common. He even sent me some of his music, moody, atmospheric stuff that was surprisingly good. After about a week of chatting, he asked me out. He suggested this small, independent coffee shop in my neighborhood. I liked that he kept it low-key, not trying to impress me with some fancy restaurant. When I met him in person, he was even more appealing than in his pictures. Tall, dark hair, intense eyes. He had that whole tortured soul thing down pat. The date went really well. We talked for hours, easily moving from one topic to another. He was a good listener, asking thoughtful questions and actually seeming interested in my answers. There was definitely a spark. I left feeling excited, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I'd actually found someone decent on a dating app. We went out again a few days later, and then again the week after that. Things were progressing quickly, but it felt natural, effortless. He started inviting me back to his place after our dates. He had this huge, loft-style apartment in an old industrial building, filled with his art, his instruments, and a generally bohemian vibe. It was messy, but in a charming, artistic way. One night, after a few glasses of wine, we ended up sleeping together. It was good, really good. And afterward, lying in his arms, I felt this sense of comfort, like I was finally where I was supposed to be. That's when things started to get weird. The first sign was the dreams. I started having these incredibly vivid, disturbing dreams, filled with images of dark forests, shadowy figures, and a constant sense of dread. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I chalked it up to stress at work, but the dreams persisted, growing more intense each night. Then there were the coincidences. I'd be walking down the street and see someone who looked exactly like Liam, only to realize it wasn't him. Or I'd hear a song on the radio that he had sent me, even though I hadn't played it in days. It was like he was everywhere, even when he wasn't physically there. And then he started getting possessive, not in an overtly controlling way, but more subtle. He'd get jealous if I mentioned hanging out with friends, or if I didn't respond to his text immediately. He'd always want to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. It wasn't aggressive, but it was persistent, like he needed to keep tabs on me at all times. I tried to brush it off, told myself he was just really into me, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind kept telling me something was wrong. One night, I was at his apartment, and he was showing me some of his new artwork. He had this one painting that was particularly disturbing. It was a portrait of a woman with long, dark hair, her face obscured by shadows. There was something about her eyes that just sent chills down my spine. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He just smiled and said, "Oh, just a muse." I didn't push it, but the painting lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen that woman before somewhere. A few days later, I was browsing through Liam's bookshelf when I stumbled upon an old, leather-bound journal. It was locked, but curiosity got the better of me. I managed to pry it open, and what I found inside horrified me. The journal was filled with page after page of disturbing writings, detailing Liam's obsession with dark magic, rituals, and the occult. There were sketches of symbols I didn't recognize, and descriptions of ceremonies involving blood and sacrifices. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just some quirky artist with a dark side. This was something much more sinister. I kept reading, my hands shaking, until I came across an entry that mentioned me by name. It talked about how I was the perfect vessel, how my energy was pure and potent, and how he planned to use me in an upcoming ritual to achieve enlightenment. I slammed the journal shut, my mind reeling. I had to get out of there. I quietly closed the journal, put it back on the shelf, and went to find Liam. He was in his studio, working on a new painting. "Liam, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling. He turned around, a strange look in his eyes. "What is it, my love?" "I know about the journal," I said, my voice barely a whisper. His expression changed. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "So you know," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Well, that simplifies things." He started walking toward me, and I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice shaking. He just chuckled. "It's too late for that, my dear. You're already part of the plan." I turned and ran, desperate to escape his grasp. I ran through the apartment, out the door, and down the stairs, not stopping until I was out on the street, gasping for breath. I didn't look back. I went straight to the police station and told them everything. They were skeptical at first, but when they searched Liam's apartment, they found the journal, the occult symbols, and evidence of disturbing rituals. Liam was arrested and charged with multiple offenses. It turned out that he had a history of mental illness and had been involved in several cult-like groups over the years. The woman in the painting? She was one of his previous girlfriends who had mysteriously disappeared. They never found her body. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of what happened. I have nightmares, I'm constantly on edge, and I have a hard time trusting people. I deleted all my dating apps, and I am too scared to ever try to date again. But at least I'm alive. I'll never forget Liam, and I'll never forget the terrifying experience of dating a man who turned out to be a dangerous, delusional monster. I thought dating apps were supposed to help you find love, not lead you to a potential murder. I wish someone had warned me about the echo chamber of dating apps, the curated realities, and the insidious ways they warp your perception of connection and self-worth. I wish someone had sat me down and said, "Look, honey, this isn't real life. This is a funhouse mirror reflecting distorted versions of people, desires, and expectations. Don't let it become your sole source of validation." See, I jumped into the online dating world with both feet, full of naive optimism. I'd been single for a while, focusing on my career and personal growth, but I started feeling that pang of wanting companionship, someone to share my life with. Everyone was doing it, right? Swiping, matching, awkward first dates. It seemed like the modern rite of passage. At first, it was kind of fun. The novelty of seeing so many faces, reading snippets of their lives, and feeling that little dopamine hit with each match. I meticulously crafted my profile, choosing photos that were flattering but also authentically me, whatever that meant, and writing a bio that was witty, informative, and slightly mysterious. I thought I was being clever, showcasing my personality while still leaving them wanting more. The matches started rolling in, and I felt a surge of excitement. Here were all these potential partners, right at my fingertips. It was like a dating buffet, and I was ready to feast. But that's when the cracks started to appear. The conversations were mostly bland. A lot of, "Hey, how's your day going?" and generic questions about my profile. It felt like people weren't really reading what I wrote, just swiping based on looks, and then going through the motions. I tried to be engaging, asking thoughtful questions, and sharing interesting anecdotes, but often I was met with one-word answers or ghosting. And the ghosting, oh, the ghosting. It became so commonplace that I almost expected it. We'd have a great conversation, make plans to meet, and then poof, they'd disappear into the digital ether, never to be heard from again. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. It was infuriating and disheartening. I started to take it personally, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I'd said to scare them away. Was I not attractive enough? Not interesting enough? I began to measure my worth by the number of matches I got, the number of likes on my photos, the length of the conversations. If I had a slow week, I'd feel down, like I wasn't good enough. I became obsessed with optimizing my profile, tweaking my photos, rewriting my bio, trying to crack the code of the algorithm. The dates themselves were often even more disappointing. Some guys looked nothing like their pictures, a fact that should have been obvious, but still stung. Others were completely different in person than they were online, arrogant, boring, or just plain weird. And then there were the ones who seemed great at first, but turned out to be emotionally unavailable or commitment phobic. I started to develop a cynical outlook on dating. I saw everyone as a potential disappointment, a time waster, or worse, a catfish. I became hypercritical, judging every profile, every message, every date. I was constantly comparing myself to others, feeling like I was never quite good enough. The apps became an echo chamber of insecurities and unrealistic expectations. I saw the same types of people over and over again, all projecting carefully crafted images of themselves. The gym selfies, the travel photos, the witty bios, it was all a performance, a competition for attention and validation. I started to believe that everyone was just looking for the next best thing, that no one was truly interested in building a genuine connection. The apps encouraged this mindset, always offering new options, new faces, new possibilities. It was like a game of endless swiping, where the goal was to find the perfect partner, even if that meant discarding perfectly good ones along the way. And the worst part was that I was doing it too. I was swiping, matching, and judging, just like everyone else. I was participating in the same toxic cycle that was making me miserable. I became addicted to the validation, the fleeting moments of excitement, even though they were ultimately empty and unsatisfying. It took me a long time to realize how much the apps were affecting my mental health. I was constantly anxious, insecure, and lonely, despite being surrounded by hundreds of potential partners. I was so focused on finding someone else to complete me that I'd forgotten how to be happy on my own. One day, I was scrolling through Tinder, feeling particularly dejected, when I saw a profile that made me cringe. It was a guy who was holding a fish he had caught, shirtless, and with a caption that said, "Looking for a girl who likes to fish and chill." I know that's just a person, but it clicked in my head. I realized that I was no longer looking for a connection. I was just trying to find someone who liked all the right things and looked a certain way. I was becoming someone I didn't even like. That's when I decided to delete all the apps. Cold turkey. It was terrifying at first. I felt like I was cutting myself off from the world, from the possibility of finding love. But after a few weeks, I started to feel a sense of relief. I had more time, more energy, and more mental space. I started focusing on myself again, on my hobbies, my friends, my goals. I rediscovered the joy of being alone, of not needing someone else to validate my worth. I started to appreciate the small things in life, the things that had gotten lost in the noise of the apps. I still want to find a partner someday, but I'm approaching dating differently now. I'm not relying on apps as my primary source of connection. I'm meeting people through friends, through activities I enjoy, through real-life interactions. I'm being more authentic, more vulnerable, and more selective. I'm also being more patient. I know that finding the right person takes time, and I'm not willing to settle for someone who doesn't truly see and appreciate me for who I am. I'm no longer chasing after the perfect profile, the fleeting moments of validation. I'm looking for something real, something meaningful, something that can't be found on a screen. If I could go back and warn my younger self about the dangers of online dating, I would tell her to be careful, to be discerning, and to never let the apps define her worth. I would tell her to prioritize real-life connections over digital ones, to trust her gut, and to remember that she is already whole and complete, with or without a partner. Most of all, I would tell her that it's okay to be single, that it's okay to take a break, and that sometimes the best way to find love is to stop looking for it altogether. It is okay to be on your own. It is normal to take a break. It is okay to go slowly. I wasn't told that. I wish someone had. It started innocently enough, like most bad decisions do. A dating app. One of those newer ones that promised authentic connections and no more surface-level swiping. I was cautiously optimistic, tired of the endless parade of gym selfies and one-liner bios that seemed to dominate the other apps. This one felt different, or at least, it presented itself that way. That's probably why I even considered going out with him in the first place. Mark, he messaged me first, complimenting my profile picture, a candid shot of me laughing with friends at a concert. He said he liked my smile, that it seemed genuine. That's what got me, I think. Genuine. I wanted genuine. His profile was thoughtful, filled with interests that mirrored my own. Hiking, art museums, independent films. He seemed intelligent, introspective, and normal. We messaged back and forth for a few days, the conversation flowing easily. He asked about my work, my hobbies, my dreams. He listened intently, responding with thoughtful questions and insightful observations. He even made me laugh, which was a definite plus. After a week, he suggested we meet up. I hesitated, as I always do. Dating always feels like such a gamble, a leap of faith into the unknown. But there was something about Mark that felt safe. Maybe it was the way he listened, the way he seemed to genuinely care about what I had to say. Or maybe I was just lonely and desperate for connection. Whatever the reason, I said yes. He suggested a local coffee shop, a place I'd been to countless times. It was familiar, comfortable, a neutral space. Perfect for a first date. I arrived a few minutes early, feeling a nervous flutter in my stomach. I ordered a latte and found a table near the window, watching the passers-by. He was on time, which was a good sign. He looked different than his pictures. Not in a bad way, just different. Dayir, Mavi. More intense. He had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. He greeted me with a warm smile and a hug that lingered a little longer than expected. The first hour was fine. The conversation flowed easily, just like it had online. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite books. He was engaging, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. But as the date progressed, things started to shift. The questions became more personal, more probing. He asked about my past relationships, my insecurities, my deepest fears. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. It felt intense, uncomfortably so. He started sharing details about his own life, stories that were dark and unsettling. He talked about his troubled childhood, his struggles with depression, his feelings of alienation. He spoke in a low, almost monotone voice, his eyes filled with a strange mix of sadness and anger. I tried to steer the conversation in a lighter direction, but he kept bringing it back to the darkness. He seemed obsessed with it. He started making these subtle, almost imperceptible gestures that made me uneasy. A lingering touch on my arm, a slow, deliberate blink, a subtle shift in his posture. It was like he was testing me, probing my boundaries. I started feeling trapped, like I couldn't escape. The coffee shop suddenly felt small, claustrophobic. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know how. I made an excuse to go to the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't the date I had imagined. This wasn't the authentic connection I was hoping for. This was something else entirely. When I returned to the table, Mark was waiting for me, a strange smile on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes piercing. "Yeah, fine," I replied, trying to sound casual. Just needed to freshen up. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on me. I was just telling you about my last girlfriend, he said, his voice low and menacing. She didn't appreciate me. She didn't understand me. He paused, his eyes narrowing. She left me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It must have been difficult. He leaned closer, his face inches from mine. It was, he whispered, but I learned a valuable lesson. What's that? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Never let anyone leave you, he said, his eyes blazing. I knew then that I had to get out of there. I have to go, I said, standing up abruptly. I have an early meeting tomorrow. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, watching me, a chilling smile on his face. I practically ran out of the coffee shop, not stopping until I reached my car. I locked the doors and started the engine, my hands shaking. I drove home as fast as I could, my eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. I didn't feel safe until I was inside my apartment, the doors locked and the blinds drawn. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent a jolt of fear through my body. I kept replaying the date in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. Was I overreacting? Was he just a lonely, troubled guy? Or was he something more sinister? The next day, I received a message from him. I had a wonderful time last night. It read, I can't wait to see you again. I deleted the message and blocked his number, but it wasn't enough. For weeks, I felt like I was being followed. I saw him everywhere, on the street, in the grocery store, at the gym. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always there, lurking in the shadows. I started taking different routes to work, varying my schedule, avoiding places I knew he frequented. I even considered moving. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my apartment. I peered through the blinds and saw him standing there, across the street, staring up at my window. He was just standing there, motionless, his eyes fixed on my apartment. I froze, paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what to do. I considered calling the police, but I didn't have any proof that he was doing anything wrong. He was just standing there. After what felt like an eternity, he finally turned and walked away. But the image of him standing there, staring at my apartment, is burned into my memory. I never saw him again after that, but the fear remains. I still check my locks multiple times before bed. I still avoid walking alone at night. I still jump at every unexpected sound. The dating app is long gone, deleted and forgotten. I'm not sure I'll ever date again. The risk is just too high. The thought of opening myself up to someone, of trusting them with my vulnerability, is terrifying. Dating apps promised connection, love, and companionship, but all I found was fear, and a nightmare that I can't seem to escape, forever replaying in my head. A constant reminder of how easily trust can be broken, and how quickly a dream can turn into a living hell. It was supposed to be a date. It ended up being a life sentence of paranoia and fear. And the worst part is, I still don't know why. What did he want? What was he planning? I'll probably never know. And that's the scariest thing of all. I never thought this would happen to me. But here I am, staring at a flickering neon sign that spells out the Lucky Clam in a font that screams desperation. Rain is coming down in sheets, plastering my hair to my forehead and doing absolutely nothing to soothe the knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I can hear the bass-heavy thumping of whatever god-awful music is playing inside, even through the closed door. This is it. This is my first ever blind date, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to regret every life choice that led me to this moment. Let me back up a little. My friend Sarah, bless her well-meaning but often misguided heart, decided I needed to get back out there. I've been single for, let's just say longer than I care to admit. I'm perfectly happy mostly. I have a good job, great friends, and a cat who tolerates my existence. But Sarah insists I'm wasting my prime and withering away into a spinster. Hence, the blind date. She swore up and down that this guy, Mark, was perfect for me. They worked together, apparently, and according to Sarah, he's smart, funny, and genuinely a good person. She showed me a picture, which was blurry and taken from a distance, but he looked normal. Not scary, not unattractive. Just normal. That was my first mistake. Believing Sarah. My second was agreeing to this in the first place. Now, here I am, hovering outside a dive bar that smells vaguely of old fish and regret, wondering if I can fake a sudden illness and escape without anyone noticing. But Sarah would never forgive me. And honestly, part of me is just curious. Maybe, just maybe, this Marguy will be as great as she claims. Maybe I'll actually have a good time. Maybe I'll finally have a decent dating story to tell that doesn't involve me accidentally setting a man's beard on fire. That's a story for another time. Taking a deep breath, I push open the door and step inside the Lucky Clam. The smell is even worse than I imagined. It's a pungent combination of stale beer, fried seafood, and something vaguely industrial that I can't quite place. The music is deafening, a generic pop song that I'm pretty sure was popular about 5 years ago. The bar is packed, mostly with people who look like they've been here since happy hour started at noon. I scan the room, trying to spot a vaguely familiar face. Sarah had given me a description of Mark. Brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a blue shirt. Helpful. About half the male population in this establishment fits that description. After a few awkward minutes of craning my neck and squinting, I spot someone who might be him. He's sitting at a small table in the corner, nursing a beer and staring intently at his phone. He has brown hair and blue eyes, and yes, he's wearing a blue shirt. Bingo. I take another deep breath and make my way over to him, trying to navigate the crowded room without spilling anyone's drink or tripping over the sticky floor. "Mark," I ask, my voice barely audible over the music. He looks up, startled, and his eyes widen slightly. Oh yeah, he has a nervous smile and a slightly receding hairline that Sarah conveniently forgot to mention. I'm Emily. Sarah set us up." He blinks a few times, then nods. "Oh, right, Emily. Sorry, I didn't recognize you. The picture Sarah showed me was different." Different good or different bad? I don't dare ask. "No worries," I say, trying to sound cheerful. "This place is, lively." He chuckles awkwardly. "Yeah, it's definitely unique." We spend the next hour making painfully small talk. It turns out Mark works in accounting, which is about as thrilling as it sounds. He mostly talks about spreadsheets and tax returns, and I try my best to feign interest. I tell him about my job as a librarian, which he seems to find equally dull. We discover that we have absolutely nothing in common, except maybe a shared acquaintance in Sarah. The conversation is stilted and awkward, filled with long pauses and nervous laughter. I'm starting to feel like I'm trapped in a bad sitcom. Then, things take a turn for the bizarre. After what feels like an eternity, Mark puts down his beer and leans in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So," he says, "Sarah didn't tell you about my other interest, did she?" I raise an eyebrow, confused. "Other interest?" "Like a hobby." He shakes his head slowly, his eyes darting around the room as if he's afraid someone is listening. "Not exactly a hobby. More like a calling." He pauses for dramatic effect, then continues. "I'm a truth seeker." "A truth seeker? What the hell does that even mean?" "A truth seeker?" I repeat, my voice laced with skepticism. "What kind of truth are we talking about here?" He smiles knowingly. "The truth about everything, Emily. The truth about the government, about aliens, about the real history of the world." Oh, great. He's a conspiracy theorist. This is just my luck. He spends the next half hour rambling about chemtrails, the Illuminati, and the lizard people who secretly control the world. He claims to have inside information from anonymous sources on the internet, and he shows me blurry photos on his phone that supposedly prove his theories. I try to politely disengage, but he's relentless. He's convinced that I'm one of the awakened, and that I need to join him on his quest for the truth. I start to panic. This is way beyond awkward. This is bordering on delusional. I need to get out of here, and fast. "Mark," I say, interrupting his rant about the moon landing being faked. "I think I need to go. I'm not feeling very well." He looks at me with suspicion. "Are you sure? We were just getting to the good stuff. I was about to tell you about the secret society that controls the banking system." "No, really, I insist. I think I'm coming down with something. Thanks for the enlightening conversation." I stand up, grab my purse, and practically sprint towards the exit. He calls after me. "Don't forget to do your research, Emily. The truth is out there." I don't look back. As I stumble out into the rain, I can't help but laugh. This is the worst date I've ever been on by far. But at least it's a good story. I can already picture myself telling Sarah about it, complete with exaggerated hand gestures and dramatic pauses. She'll probably feel terrible for setting us up, but she'll also be secretly thrilled that I finally have a dating horror story worthy of sharing. I make it home soaked to the bone and immediately change into my pajamas. I pour myself a large glass of wine and curl up on the couch with my cat, who seems equally unimpressed by my evening. As I scroll through my phone, I notice a new message from an unknown number. It was nice meeting you, Emily. I know you're not ready to accept the truth yet, but I have faith that you will come around. Keep an open mind, and watch out for the pigeons. They're always watching. I freeze. How did he get my number? And what's with the pigeon comment? A wave of paranoia washes over me. Maybe this isn't just a funny story. Maybe this guy is actually dangerous. I block the number and check all my social media accounts, making sure everything is set to private. I spend the rest of the night nervously watching out the window, half expecting to see Mark lurking in the shadows, surrounded by an army of mind-controlled pigeons. The next day, I tell Sarah everything. She's horrified. She swears she had no idea Mark was a conspiracy theorist, and she apologizes profusely for setting us up. She even offers to talk to him at work and tell him to leave me alone. I politely decline. I don't want to escalate the situation. I just want to forget the whole thing ever happened. But the truth is, I'm still a little shaken up. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I keep seeing pigeons everywhere, and I can't help but wonder if they're really just birds, or if they're part of some elaborate surveillance network. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the thing about conspiracy theories. They have a way of getting into your head, of making you question everything you thought you knew. I'm not saying I believe in the lizard people or the Illuminati, but I'm also not saying that I completely dismiss the possibility. After my experience with Mark, I'm starting to think that anything is possible. So here I am, a few weeks later, still single, still slightly paranoid, and definitely not going on any more blind dates. I'm back to my quiet, predictable life, surrounded by my books and my cat. And you know what? I'm perfectly okay with that. Maybe wasting my prime as a spinster isn't so bad after all. At least I'm not being chased by conspiracy theorists and their pigeon spies. And that's a truth I can live with. Alright, so, yeah, this is a dating story. But not the kind where I found the love of my life, or even had a hilarious first date disaster. This is the kind where I learned a lot about myself, about other people, and about the hidden dangers of the internet, all wrapped up in one very bizarre experience. It all started, innocently enough, on a niche dating site. I won't name it because honestly, it's probably defunct by now, but it catered to a pretty specific, and maybe slightly nerdy, interest of mine. I was in my early 20s, pretty lonely, and eager to connect with people who shared my passions. I saw his profile, and he seemed to be my type, so I decided to send him a message. His username was the archivist, which should have been a red flag right there, but I was intrigued. His profile was filled with obscure references, philosophical quotes, and a general air of intellectual mystery. He was attractive, too, in a brooding, artistic sort of way. Think long hair, intense eyes, and a wardrobe that looked like it came straight out of a vintage store. We started chatting, and I was immediately hooked. He was witty, insightful, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, bonding over our shared love of old movies, forgotten books, and unusual ideas. He was charming and flattering. He complimented my writing, my sense of humor, even my taste in music. I felt seen, understood, and dare I say it, a little bit smitten. After a couple of weeks of intense online communication, he suggested we meet in person. I was hesitant at first. I'd had my fair share of online dating fails, and I was worried that the chemistry wouldn't translate in real life. But the archivist was persistent, and eventually I caved. He suggested a small, independent coffee shop in a part of town I rarely visited. It seemed like a safe, low-pressure environment, so I agreed. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, how to style my hair, and what to talk about. I wanted to make a good impression, to show him that I was just as interesting and intelligent in person as I was online. When I arrived at the coffee shop, he was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner. He looked exactly as I expected, maybe even more attractive in person. He greeted me with a warm smile and a hug, and I immediately felt my nerves melt away. The date started off great. We talked easily, picking up right where we left off online. He was even more charming and engaging in person, telling stories with passion and humor. I found myself laughing, blushing, and completely lost in the moment. But then, things started to get weird. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. He started asking me questions about my past. Not the usual getting-to-know-you kind of questions, but intensely personal ones. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my deepest fears, and my biggest regrets. I answered honestly, maybe a little too honestly, feeling flattered that he was so interested in my life. But the questions kept coming, growing more and more probing, until I started to feel like I was being interrogated. He also started making strange comments about my appearance. He fixated on small details, like the way my hair fell, the shape of my eyes, and the color of my skin. He said things like, "You have the most interesting birthmarks, and your eyes remind me of someone I used to know." It was unsettling, like he was analyzing me, dissecting me, rather than simply getting to know me. And there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A darkness in his eyes, a hint of obsession in his voice, that made me feel deeply uneasy. As the date wore on, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He started talking about conspiracy theories, ancient prophecies, and the hidden forces that control the world. He spoke in riddles and metaphors, dropping cryptic hints that I couldn't decipher. He claimed to have access to secret knowledge, to be part of a select group of people who knew the truth about reality. I tried to steer the conversation back to more normal topics, but he wouldn't let it go. He was consumed by his own strange world, and he wanted to drag me into it with him. By the end of the date, I was completely freaked out. I made up an excuse about having to leave early and practically ran out of the coffee shop. I didn't even say goodbye. I blocked his number and his profile on the dating site, hoping to erase him from my life. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I started receiving anonymous messages online. They were cryptic, unsettling messages, filled with the same kind of strange language and obscure references that the archivist had used. They seemed to be taunting me, hinting that he knew things about me that he shouldn't. I tried to ignore them, but they kept coming, popping up in different places, on different platforms. It was like he was everywhere, watching me, stalking me. I started to feel paranoid, afraid to leave my apartment, afraid to answer my phone. I changed my passwords, tightened my privacy settings, and tried to make myself invisible online. But it didn't matter. He always found a way to reach me. One night, I came home from work to find a package waiting for me on my doorstep. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, there was a single object, an old photograph. It was a picture of me, taken without my knowledge, from across the street. It was a clear message. He was watching me. I freaked out. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything without more evidence. They said it was probably just a prank, that I shouldn't worry about it. But I knew it wasn't a prank. I knew it was the archivist, and I knew he was dangerous. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I did some research online, trying to find out more about him. I searched his username, his email address, anything I could find. I discovered that he had a history of online harassment, that he had stalked and threatened other women in the past. I also found a forum where people were discussing his strange beliefs and his obsession with secret societies. It was terrifying. I realized that I had stumbled into something much bigger and much darker than I ever imagined. I knew I had to get away from him, to disappear before he could do something worse. I packed a bag, withdrew all my money from the bank, and left town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my family. I changed my name, my appearance, my entire life. I went into hiding, living in constant fear that he would find me again. It's been years since then. I've moved several times, changed jobs, and tried to rebuild my life. I still look over my shoulder, still worry about every strange message and every unfamiliar face. I know that he's still out there, somewhere, and I know that he's still watching me. The worst part is, I don't even know why. I don't know what he wants from me, what he's trying to achieve. I was just a random person he met on the internet. I was just looking for connection, for companionship, for love. Instead, I found something much more sinister. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating, about the importance of protecting my privacy, and about the darkness that can lurk behind even the most charming facades. It's a lesson I'll never forget, and it's a lesson I hope others can learn from my experience. Be careful who you trust online. Be wary of people who seem too good to be true. And always, always, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut, even when it screamed something my head refused to believe. It was summer, the kind of summer that felt like it was perpetually stuck on golden hour, all hazy light and endless possibilities. I was 23, fresh out of a bad breakup, and determined to have a hot girl summer, which, in my case, mostly involved day drinking mimosas with my friends and swiping through dating apps. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some fun, some distraction, and maybe a little bit of validation. That's when I matched with Liam. He was different, in a way that initially felt refreshing, but later revealed itself to be deeply unsettling. His profile was full of pictures of him doing interesting things, hiking remote trails, volunteering at animal shelters, attending obscure art exhibits. He seemed cultured, adventurous, and genuinely kind. He also had this brooding, mysterious vibe that I, admittedly, found attractive at the time. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He asked me about my passions, my dreams, my fears. He listened intently, responded thoughtfully, and made me feel like I was the most fascinating person in the world. It was intoxicating. After a few days of constant messaging, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a picnic at a local park, which seemed like a perfectly innocent and charming first date. I agreed, giddy with excitement and the anticipation of finally meeting this intriguing stranger in person. The day of the picnic was perfect. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the park was buzzing with activity. Liam arrived right on time, carrying a wicker basket overflowing with gourmet sandwiches, artisanal cheeses, and a bottle of chilled rose. He looked even better in person, tall, dark, and handsome, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. We found a secluded spot under a sprawling oak tree and spread out the blanket. The conversation was even better in person. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing easily and finding common ground on unexpected topics. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else before. But as the afternoon wore on, things started to shift. Subtle, almost imperceptible shifts that I initially dismissed as nerves or awkwardness. He started asking more personal questions, probing into my past relationships, my family dynamics, and my deepest insecurities. It wasn't aggressive or accusatory, but it felt invasive, like he was trying to dig up something I wasn't ready to share. Then he started making these strange, almost cryptic comments. He talked about the importance of authenticity and the need to shed our masks and embrace our true selves. It sounded profound at first, but the more he talked, the more it felt like he was building up to something uncomfortable. He began to focus on my eyes, saying they were windows to my soul, and that he could see the real me hidden beneath the surface. It was unnerving, but I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to his quirky personality. But then he reached out and touched my hand, his fingers lingering a little too long. His touch was cold, almost clammy, and it sent a shiver down my spine. He looked deep into my eyes and said, "I can see you're scared, but don't be. I'm here to help you." Help me with what? I wanted to ask, but the words caught in my throat. A wave of unease washed over me, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened. "Don't be afraid," he repeated, his voice low and hypnotic. "I know what you need." I finally managed to yank my hand away and stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I have to go," I stammered, grabbing my bag and backing away from him. He stood up too, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice deceptively gentle. "I thought we were connecting." I'm not feeling well," I lied, desperate to escape. "I think I'm getting a migraine." He didn't try to stop me, but his eyes followed me as I hurried away, a silent promise that this wasn't over. I practically ran out of the park, not stopping until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. Once I was safely inside, I locked the doors and took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I looked back at the park, but Liam was gone. I drove home in a daze, replaying the afternoon in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was seriously off with Liam. It wasn't just awkwardness or quirkiness. It was something darker, something more sinister. I spent the rest of the day researching him online, scouring his social media profiles, trying to find some explanation for his strange behavior. But there was nothing. His profiles were carefully curated, full of generic posts and inspirational quotes. There was nothing that revealed anything about his true personality or his intentions. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from him. "I hope you're feeling better," it read. "I was hoping to see you again soon." I deleted the message without responding and blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing strange things happening around my apartment. Things out of place, noises in the night, a general sense that I was being watched. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was just my anxiety playing tricks on me. But the feeling persisted. One evening, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and slowly pushed the door open. The apartment was empty, but it was clear someone had been there. Things were scattered around, drawers were open, and there was a strange, musty smell in the air. I called the police, but they couldn't find any signs of forced entry and told me it was likely just a burglary. But I knew it wasn't just a burglary. It was Liam. He was sending me a message, letting me know that he was still out there, still watching me. I was terrified. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, checking the locks on my doors and windows multiple times a day, and avoiding going out alone. I felt like I was living in a horror movie, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bags and moved back in with my parents, hoping that the distance would offer some protection. I never heard from Liam again, and eventually, the fear started to fade. But the experience left a lasting impact on me. It taught me to trust my gut, even when it screamed something my head refused to believe. It taught me that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most charming and intriguing. And it taught me that it's okay to prioritize my safety and well-being, even if it means being rude or overreacting. That day at the park, I ignored my instincts because I didn't want to be impolite or judgmental. I wanted to give Liam a chance to see the good in him. But in doing so, I put myself in danger. I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away, even if you don't know why, even if it seems irrational or unfounded. Because sometimes your gut knows things your head hasn't figured out yet, and trusting that intuition can save you from a world of pain. I usually try to avoid telling the story, mostly because even years later, it still creeps me out. And the worst part, it actually happened to me. Like, this isn't some campfire ghost story. This is my actual life, and it was terrifying. I was in my early 20s, living in a small college town, and, like most people my age, I was navigating the wonderful world of online dating. Back then, it was less about swiping and more about long, rambling profiles on OkCupid. Remember those? I was looking for someone who was intelligent, funny, and maybe a little bit quirky. I wasn't expecting perfection, just someone I could connect with. That's when I stumbled across Michael's profile. He seemed perfect, at least on paper. He was a grad student in philosophy, loved obscure movies, and had a profile full of witty observations. We messaged back and forth for a few weeks, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was charming, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Red flag number 1, he really seemed interested in me. We decided to meet up for coffee at a local bookstore cafe. I was nervous, of course, but also excited. He was even more attractive in person than in his photos. He had piercing blue eyes, a disarming smile, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Our conversation was just as engaging as it had been online. We talked about books, politics, and our shared love of vintage records. I was smitten. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly got me. We went on a few more dates after that. We saw a foreign film at a tiny independent theater, explored a hidden hiking trail outside of town, and even cooked dinner together at my apartment. He was attentive, thoughtful, and always made me laugh. He started bringing me small gifts, a rare edition of my favorite book, a handmade scarf he claimed his grandmother had knitted, and a vintage vinyl record he knew I'd been searching for. It all felt so romantic, like something out of a movie. But then, things started to get weird. Subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. He started asking me a lot of questions about my past relationships, digging for details about my exes. He'd probe about their personalities, their flaws, and why we broke up. He'd even ask me if I still thought about them. It felt intrusive, like he was trying to compare himself to them. But because I convinced myself that he was my soulmate, I brushed it off. Then, the questions became more personal, more intense. He wanted to know everything about my daily routine. When I woke up, what I ate for breakfast, what route I took to work, who I talked to during the day. He'd call me at odd hours, just to check in and see what I was doing. I started to feel like I was being monitored, like I was living under a microscope. I hated it, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. One night, I was out with some friends at a bar, and I got a text from Michael. "Who are you with?" it read. I texted him back, telling him I was just hanging out with some friends. He responded almost immediately. "Which friends? What are you talking about?" I felt a chill run down my spine. How did he know I was lying? I hadn't said anything about talking to anyone. I excused myself from my friends and went outside to call him. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice tight with anger. I told him I was at the bar, just like I had texted him. "I can see you," he said. "You're lying. You're talking to someone." I looked around, panicked. The street was crowded, but I couldn't see him anywhere. "Michael, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm watching you," he said. "I know what you're doing. You're going to regret this." He hung up. I was terrified. I ran back inside the bar and told my friends what had happened. They tried to reassure me, telling me I was probably just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I went home that night and locked all the doors and windows. I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the old house sent shivers down my spine. I kept imagining Michael lurking outside, watching me. I stayed up all night, clutching my phone, waiting for something to happen. The next day, I decided to confront him. I called him and told him I wanted to talk. He agreed to meet me at a park near my house. When I arrived, he was sitting on a bench, looking strangely calm. I immediately started yelling at him, accusing him of stalking me and invading my privacy. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, listening, with a faint smile on his face. "I just wanted to protect you," he said finally, his voice soft and sincere. "I know what's best for you. You just don't realize it yet." I told him he was crazy, that he needed help. I told him I never wanted to see him again. He just nodded, still smiling. "You'll come around," he said. "You'll see." I walked away, shaken and angry. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media accounts, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching me. For the next few weeks, I was constantly on edge. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the crowds for his face. I avoided going out alone, and I made sure to always let someone know where I was going. Then, one afternoon, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken through my bedroom window. I was sitting on my bed, reading a book. The photo was clear, crisp, and undeniably recent. I screamed. I dropped the box and ran to the nearest police station. I showed them the photo and told them everything that had happened. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They advised me to file a restraining order and to install security cameras at my house. I followed their advice. I got a restraining order against Michael, and I invested in a high-tech security system. I felt safer, but I was still terrified. I knew that a piece of paper and a few cameras wouldn't stop him if he was truly determined. For a long while, my life was consumed by fear. Then, one day, I got a call from the police. They had arrested Michael for stalking another woman. Apparently, he had been doing the same thing to her that he had done to me. The constant questioning, the monitoring, the unwanted gifts. They had found evidence linking him to both of us, including the photograph of me. He went to trial and was eventually convicted of stalking. He was sentenced to several years in prison. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but I knew that even behind bars, he would still be in my head. Years have passed since then, and I've tried to move on with my life, but the experience changed me. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. I'm hesitant to trust people, especially men, and I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. The scariest part of the story, it wasn't the gifts, or the questions, or even the photos. It was the fact that he genuinely believed he was doing it out of love. He thought he was protecting me, that he knew what was best for me. That kind of twisted thinking is what makes these situations so dangerous. It's a reminder that sometimes the monsters aren't hiding in the shadows. They're standing right in front of you, smiling, telling you they love you. I met him at a coffee shop. Standard rom-com opening, right? Except this wasn't a movie, and the only laughs were the nervous kind that bubble up when you realize you've made a terrible mistake. He was tall, kind of lanky, with a shock of dark hair that perpetually fell into his eyes. He was reading a book, something dense and philosophical, and I, ever the sucker for intellectual posturing, struck up a conversation. His name was Silas, and he was different. At first, different was intriguing. He wasn't like the guys I usually dated. The fratty types, the finance bros, the guys who talk more about their cars than their feelings. Silas was introspective, artistic, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. We talked for hours that first day, about everything from existentialism to our favorite childhood cartoons. He had this way of making me feel seen, understood, like I was the only person in the world who truly got him. It was intoxicating. We started dating, and things moved fast. Too fast, looking back. He was intense, showering me with affection and attention. He wrote me poems, painted me portraits, and planned elaborate dates that felt like scenes from a movie. I was swept off my feet, convinced I'd finally found the one. He was also very jealous. At first it was things, such as not wanting me to go out with my friends. Then it escalated. But there were cracks, subtle at first, that I chose to ignore. He was possessive, always wanting to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. He'd call me multiple times a day, ostensibly just to check in. But the underlying tone was always one of suspicion. He didn't like me spending time with my friends, claiming they were a bad influence and didn't understand our unique connection. I brushed it off as him being passionate, a sign of how deeply he cared. I wanted to believe it, needed to believe it, because the alternative, that I was falling for a controlling, manipulative guy, was too terrifying to contemplate. My friends tried to warn me. They saw the red flags waving frantically, the subtle ways Silas isolated me from my support system. But I was too blinded by the initial charm, too caught up in the whirlwind romance, to listen. One night, I went out for drinks with my girlfriends. I told Silas about it beforehand, and he seemed surprisingly okay with it. He even told me to have fun, which should have been my first clue that something was wrong. When I got home, he was waiting for me, sitting in the dark on my doorstep. His face was shadowed, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, the silence thick with unspoken accusations. Then he started in with the questions. Who was I with? What did we talk about? Did any guys hit on me? His voice was low and menacing, a stark contrast to the soft, poetic tone I was used to. I tried to reassure him, telling him it was just a harmless girl's night, but he didn't believe me. He accused me of lying, of cheating, of betraying his trust. His words were like knives, cutting deep into my self-esteem. I started to cry, overwhelmed by his anger and the realization that the man I thought I knew was a figment of my imagination. He eventually calmed down, apologizing profusely, blaming his behavior on his insecurities and his deep love for me. He begged me to forgive him, promising it would never happen again. And like an idiot I did. I wanted to believe him, to cling to the illusion that our relationship was still salvageable. But the incident marked a turning point. The cracks in our facade widened, revealing the ugliness beneath. The jealousy intensified, the control tightened. He started monitoring my phone, demanding access to my social media accounts. He even began showing up unannounced at my work, just to say hi. But the message was clear. He was watching me. I was walking on eggshells, constantly censoring myself, afraid of triggering his unpredictable outbursts. I stopped seeing my friends, stopped pursuing my hobbies, stopped being myself. I became a shell of the person I once was, trapped in a relationship that was slowly suffocating me. One night, after another jealous rage fueled by nothing, I tried to leave. He blocked the door. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You're mine." I tried to push past him, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I cried out in pain, and he immediately released me, his face contorted with remorse. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I would never hurt you." But the fear in my eyes told him everything he needed to know. He saw that I was finally starting to see the truth the monster lurking beneath the surface. He lunged at me, not to hurt me, I think, but to stop me. I saw the rage in his eyes. I remember screaming. That's when everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body aching, my head throbbing. A police officer was sitting by my side, his face grim. He told me that my neighbor had heard the commotion and called the police. When they arrived, they found me unconscious on the floor, and Silas was gone. He'd disappeared, leaving no trace. I had a concussion and multiple bruises. It could have been worse. The police launched an investigation, but Silas was never found. They suspect he fled the state, maybe even the country. I don't know if he's still out there, watching me, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. The thought haunts me every day. It took me a long time to recover, both physically and emotionally. I went to therapy, cut off all contact with anyone who reminded me of him, and slowly began to rebuild my life. I'm sharing this story as a cautionary tale, a warning to anyone who thinks they can change a controlling partner, or that love can conquer all. It can't. Abusive relationships don't start with black eyes and broken bones. They start with subtle manipulations, with isolating behaviors, with a gradual erosion of your self-worth. It starts with thinking that you can control it. If you see these red flags, run. Don't try to fix him. Don't try to reason with him. Just get out. Your life may depend on it. My heart still races when I remember the dating app profile that seemed almost too good to be true. You know the ones, the kind where the guy is ruggedly handsome, claims to love hiking and dogs, major point in my book, and has a bio that's witty without being try-hard. His name was Ethan, and on paper, he was everything I was looking for. I'd been single for a while, bouncing between underwhelming dates and the comfortable routine of my own company. Ethan's profile was a breath of fresh air, a promise of something more. We matched instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked thoughtful questions about my life, my passions, and even my anxieties. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just superficially, but on a deeper level. It was a welcome change from the usual dating app banter, which often felt like a game of shallow compliments and ghosting. We talked about our favorite books, our dream travel destinations, and our shared love for obscure indie bands. It felt like we had known each other for years. After a week of intense messaging, Ethan suggested we meet up. He proposed a picnic in a secluded park just outside the city. It sounded idyllic, like something out of a movie. A blanket under a sprawling oak tree, a basket filled with gourmet sandwiches, and maybe even a shared bottle of wine. I eagerly agreed, ignoring the tiny voice in the back of my head that whispered a warning. The day of the picnic, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. It was the good kind of nervous, the kind you get when you're excited about something new and potentially amazing. I spent hours getting ready, carefully choosing my outfit, doing my hair and makeup just right. I wanted to make a good impression, to show Ethan that I was just as interesting and genuine as he seemed to be. As I drove to the park, the scenery shifted from urban sprawl to rolling hills and lush greenery. The park was even more beautiful than I had imagined, a hidden oasis of tranquility away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I followed Ethan's directions, navigating winding paths until I reached the designated meeting spot. He was already there, standing by the oak tree, a picnic basket at his feet. He looked even more handsome in person, with kind eyes and a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. We greeted each other with a hug, and I immediately felt at ease. The picnic was everything I had hoped for: delicious food, engaging conversation, and a palpable connection between us. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories, completely lost in each other's company. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Ethan's demeanor subtly shifted. He became more intense, his gaze lingering on me a little too long. He started asking personal questions, delving into my past relationships and my deepest insecurities. I found myself becoming increasingly uncomfortable, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to nerves or maybe just a different communication style. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, ornate box. My initial thought was that it was a gift, a thoughtful gesture to end our perfect date. But as he opened the box, my blood ran cold. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson velvet, was a collection of teeth. Human teeth. I stared at the box in horror, unable to speak, unable to move. Ethan's smile widened, revealing a hint of madness in his eyes. He began to tell me a A disturbing tale of a man who collected the teeth of his past lovers as trophies, as reminders of his conquests. He spoke with a chilling detachment, as if he were reciting a bedtime story. I finally found my voice, a shaky whisper that barely escaped my lips. What is this?" Ethan's eyes locked onto mine, his gaze intense and unsettling. "These are my memories," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Each tooth represents a piece of someone I used to care about, a piece I'll never let go of." I knew, in that moment, that I was in danger. This wasn't just a weird date gone wrong. This was something far more sinister. I had to get out of there, but I was paralyzed by fear. Ethan reached out and gently took my hand, his touch sending shivers down my spine. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "I would never hurt you. I just want you to understand me." I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened, his smile fading into a cold, hard stare. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice laced with a chilling possessiveness. "You're going to stay here with me, and we're going to be together forever." Panic surged through me, and I finally found the strength to break free. I yanked my hand away from Ethan and scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't say a word. I just turned and ran, blindly, desperately, through the park. I could hear Ethan behind me, his footsteps pounding on the ground, his laughter echoing through the trees. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, fueled by adrenaline and terror. I ran until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys as I desperately tried to unlock the door. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine, my hand shaking so violently that I could barely grip the steering wheel. I peeled out of a parking lot, speeding down the winding road, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, expecting Ethan to appear at any moment. I didn't stop driving until I reached the city, until I was surrounded by the safety of bright lights and crowded streets. I drove straight to the police station, my mind racing, my body trembling. I told them everything about the dating app profile, the perfect picnic, and the box of teeth. The police took my statement seriously and launched an investigation. They tracked down Ethan, but he was gone. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no evidence, no clues to his whereabouts. They searched his apartment, but it was clean, sterile, as if he had never lived there at all. The police suspected he had done this before, that he was a master manipulator who preyed on vulnerable women, luring them in with his charm, and then, well, I didn't want to think about what he had done to the others. I just wanted to forget, to erase the memory of that terrifying day from my mind. But I couldn't. The image of the box of teeth, Ethan's chilling smile, his possessive gaze, it was all etched into my brain, a permanent reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the seemingly perfect. I changed my phone number, deleted my dating app profiles, and moved to a new city, hoping to start fresh, to leave the past behind. But the fear lingered, a constant companion that followed me wherever I went. I became hypervigilant, suspicious of every man I met, terrified of trusting anyone again. It's been years since that fateful picnic, but my heart still races when I remember Ethan, the man who seemed too good to be true, the man who showed me that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who hide behind a charming smile and a well-crafted dating app profile. I still catch myself wondering whatever happened to him, and I shudder to think of the other women he might have found, the other boxes he might have filled.